I never thought a simple sentence could pull the floor out from under me, but that night it did. I was standing in the kitchen, still tired from another long day of working on the so-called family project, when my mother laughed softly and said, "We just wanted to keep you busy." She said it like it was a joke, like the past 3 months of my life hadn't been swallowed by endless tasks she refused to explain. I blinked at her, confused, and before I could ask what she meant, she added, "We needed you out of the way." Those words hit harder than anything she'd ever said to me. It felt like someone had pressed a cold hand to the back of my neck. I stared at her, waiting for her to take it back, to say she didn't mean it that way, but she didn't. She just continued slicing vegetables, humming under her breath as if nothing strange had slipped out. I asked her what she meant, my voice cracking in a way I hoped she didn't hear. She didn't answer. She simply called for my father, and when he walked in, the look they shared told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't guilt. It wasn't annoyance. It was fear. Quiet, tightly controlled fear. That look made something inside me go still. I pushed them again for an explanation. Why had they kept me trapped in a routine that felt like a full-time job? Why had they insisted it was important every time I questioned it? Why had they isolated me from everyone I cared about? They didn't answer any of it. They just kept exchanging those silent glances like two people standing on a cliff's edge and pretending the ground wasn't crumbling. My father finally said, "Ava, don't make this dramatic." My mother added, "You're overthinking again." But I wasn't. Not this time. The house felt different that night. Heavier. Every shadow suddenly seemed to hold a secret I'd never been meant to find. And beneath all of it, a small voice inside me whispered that the truth wasn't just uncomfortable. It was dangerous. I didn't know what they were hiding yet, but for the first time in my life, I knew one thing for certain. My parents were afraid of me finding out, and that fear was the beginning of everything. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last 3 months in my head. 90 days that felt like one long blur. At first, I thought my parents were just being demanding. They'd always loved giving me chores. But this had been different. Every morning started with a list waiting on the kitchen counter, organizing old files, sorting through boxes in the attic, cleaning out the storage unit they claimed was a mess, resetting passwords, scanning receipts, cataloging invoices I didn't understand. And every time I asked why, they told me the same thing. It's important, Ava. Important. That word became a chain around my ankles. They kept me so busy I barely had time to think. I stopped seeing friends. I stopped going out. Even my phone felt like something they monitored, because the moment I texted someone too long, my mother appeared behind me asking, "Don't you have work to finish?" What work? They never explained. They just handed me tasks until I fell asleep at my desk, and the whole time, I brushed it off. I told myself I was helping. I told myself they needed me. I told myself it was nice that they finally trusted me with something. But now, looking back, every piece of it felt staged, deliberate, like they were building a wall of distractions around me so high I couldn't see what was on the other side. The next morning, I tried confronting them again. I stood in the kitchen doorway and asked why they needed me out of the way. Why my mother said it so casually, like blocking me from my own life was normal. My father didn't even look up from the newspaper. He just sighed and said, "You've finally become useful, Ava. Don't ruin it with questions." Useful. Like I was a tool they had finally figured out how to operate. My mother chimed in with a soft, mocking laugh. "You overthink everything. Just do what you're told." Their words didn't sting the way they usually did. They landed differently, like they'd practiced them, like they were trying to keep me calm or keep me blind. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I tossed and turned, replaying every moment, every errand, every strange look they gave each other whenever I finished a task. And the more I thought about it, the louder the question grew. What exactly had they kept me busy for? The answer felt close. Too close. Close enough to make my skin crawl. I woke up the next morning with a tightness in my chest that wouldn't loosen. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that makes your instincts sit up. I walked down the hallway, planning to grab water, when I heard my father's voice coming from his office. It wasn't his normal voice, not stern, not annoyed. It was low, tense, almost shaking. "She doesn't suspect anything," he whispered. I froze. My whole body went still. I pressed myself against the wall, leaning closer until I could hear every word. "I said we're close, but I can't move forward without that folder. Yes, I know the deadline. Rylan is already impatient." Rylan. The name hit me like a cold gust of air. I'd never heard it before, and the way my father said it, cautious, nervous, made the hairs on my arms rise. My father didn't get nervous. He didn't whisper. And he definitely didn't report to anyone. My heart started pounding. Every thud felt loud enough to give me away. I held my breath and listened harder. "No, she's been busy. That part's handled. She doesn't know a thing." He meant me. He was talking about me. A second later, he ended the call with a shaky exhale. Then he cursed under his breath. A sharp, angry sound I had never heard come from his mouth. My father was many things, but emotional wasn't one of them. Hearing him frightened, that was new. And that was worse than anything he could have said. I slipped back into my room before he stepped out, my mind racing too fast to catch a single clear thought. What deadline? What folder? Who was Rylan? And why was I the one they needed to keep clueless? Fear sat in my throat like a stone, but something stronger pushed through it. Curiosity sharper than instinct. I waited until the house settled again, until I heard my parents' footsteps fade toward the kitchen. Then I went to the office. The papers on my father's desk were scattered, messy, nothing like his usual organized stacks. I sifted through them quickly, careful not to disturb too much. Bills, tax documents, repair receipts, all normal. And then one page made my pulse stumble. An invoice, addressed to a man whose name I recognized immediately, because he had died 2 years ago. My breath caught. My fingers trembled. Nothing about this made sense, and yet everything inside me screamed that I had just crossed a line I couldn't uncross. Whatever my parents were involved in. It wasn't just strange. It was dangerous. And for the first time, I realized the truth might destroy everything I thought I knew about my own family. I stared at the invoice for what felt like minutes, trying to convince myself I was misunderstanding it. But the date, the signature, the name, it all matched a man who had been buried for 2 years. That meant someone was using his identity, and someone in this house was helping them. My father wouldn't leave something that dangerous lying out unless he thought no one would ever question him. But now that I had seen it, I couldn't unsee it. My chest tightened as I looked around the office, searching for any sign of what he was hiding. That was when I noticed the bottom drawer of his desk, the only one with a lock. My hands moved before my fear could stop them. I grabbed a paperclip from the tray and bent it the way I used to when I was a bored teenager trying to break into my sister's diary. My fingers shook, but the muscle memory was still there. The lock clicked open with a tiny sound that felt louder than a gunshot. Inside the drawer was a thick folder, wrapped with an elastic band that had snapped in one corner from being stretched too many times. I lifted it out and opened it on the desk, and the first page stole the air from my lungs. Bank transfers. Huge amounts of money moving between accounts I didn't recognize, some with no names at all. Notes written in codes and abbreviations that looked like something out of a crime show. And then a list, a long list, of names. Most of them crossed out with heavy strokes of red ink. One name wasn't crossed out. Rylan Voss. I whispered it under my breath, feeling the weight of it settle in my stomach. I'd heard that name once before. In a news story about a fixer who handled illegal money, disappearances, and debts people didn't survive. A man the police could never pin down. A ghost in the world of organized crime. And his name appeared again and again in my father's folder. My parents weren't brushing up against something shady. They were standing in it, drowning in it, working for a man people feared more than prison. My mouth went dry as I flipped through the documents, the truth unraveling faster than I could process. The errands, the constant tasks, the isolation, they weren't random. They were calculated. They needed me distracted while they handled something that could destroy us all. Suddenly, I heard footsteps in the hallway. My heartbeat shot into my throat. I shoved the papers back into the folder, forced it into the drawer, and snapped the lock closed just as the office door handle turned. I slipped out through the side entrance, barely breathing, my hands trembling uncontrollably. That night in bed, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the name Rylan Voss written in red. Every time I took a breath, I felt the truth tightening around me. My parents weren't just lying. They were working for a criminal. And now, I knew too much. I thought I was being careful. I thought slipping out of the office unnoticed meant I still had time to figure things out. But after that day, something in the house shifted. It was subtle at first. My father lingering in the hallway when I walked by. My mother appearing behind me every time I opened my laptop. I kept telling myself I was imagining it, that I was letting fear twist everything. But the feeling wouldn't go away. Their eyes followed me too closely. Their questions came too quickly. And every answer I gave felt like it was being weighed, measured, studied. Within 2 days, they were tracking everything. Where I went, who I talked to, how long I stayed upstairs before coming back down. My father suddenly insisted on driving me everywhere. My mother kept checking in on me during the night, opening my door without knocking. They even asked me to hand over my phone for a routine software update, something they had never cared about before. I refused, and my mother just smiled, a smile that didn't touch her eyes. At first, I tried to brush it off. Maybe they were stressed. Maybe I was spiraling. But then came the night everything crystallized. I walked into the living room to grab a jacket and stopped dead. My mother was sitting on the couch with my phone unlocked in her hand, scrolling through my messages with calm, steady movements. She didn't flinch. She didn't hide it. She just watched the screen like she had every right to be there. "What are you doing?" I asked, my voice shaking. She finally looked up, and the emptiness in her expression made my stomach twist. "You're nosy, Ava," she said quietly. "We can't risk that." No apology, no excuse. She just said it like it was a fact I should have already known. In that moment, everything inside me dropped. She knew. Maybe not the details, maybe not exactly what I saw, but she knew I had found something. And the calmness in her face terrified me more than anger ever could have. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab my phone and run. But I forced myself to breathe, to move slowly, to act like this wasn't the moment my world tilted sideways. I told her I was just texting friends. Nothing important. She nodded, but didn't hand the phone back for a long, suffocating minute. From that night on, I pretended everything was normal. I smiled when they asked me to. I laughed at their jokes. I completed every task they gave me without question. I acted like the same obedient daughter they'd tried to mold for years. But inside, panic bloomed like wildfire. Quiet at first, then stronger, then all-consuming. Because now I knew one thing for certain. They weren't just hiding something. They were trying to figure out how much I knew and what they needed to do about it. I kept replaying the last few months in my mind, trying to understand what I had missed. That was when I remembered the storage unit, the one they kept sending me to organize, even though they always gave me the wrong key. Every time I asked about it, my father blamed my mother. My mother blamed my father. They laughed it off, saying the correct key was somewhere, but they never actually looked for it. Back then, I thought they were just forgetful. Now I knew they were hiding something. So I waited until they left for one of their evening walks, grabbed a spare bus card, and slipped out before they noticed. The air outside felt colder than usual, sharp against my skin, like the night itself knew what I was about to find. When I reached the unit, the wrong key felt useless in my hand. I tossed it aside and pulled a small metal tool from my pocket, the same one I'd used to pick the drawer in the office. The padlock was old, cheap, and rusting. It snapped open in less than 30 seconds. The second the door rolled up, dust swirled into the air, thick and heavy. At first glance, the unit looked ordinary. Boxes, plastic bins, some old furniture. But something felt off. The boxes weren't labeled. They weren't even stacked carefully. They were shoved against the walls like someone wanted them hidden, not stored. I opened the first box and felt my throat tighten. Financial ledgers. Pages and pages of handwritten numbers, account codes, and transactions that made no sense for a normal family. Some amounts were so large they barely fit the line. Some pages had initials instead of names. The next box was worse. Cash bundles wrapped in rubber bands, different currencies, some crisp, some old. Enough to make anyone suspicious. Then I found the photos. Men, women, some smiling, some not. Posed shots, candid shots, grainy images taken from a distance. I didn't recognize a single face, but every instinct in my body told me I wasn't supposed to see them. My hands were shaking when I opened the final box. Inside was a thin folder, and on top of it, a contract with 2 signatures. One belonged to Rylan Voss. The other was my father's, shaky, uneven, like he had signed it under pressure. My stomach dropped. There was no denying it anymore. My parents weren't brushing up against crime. They were part of it, deeply, silently, fully. And all those months they kept me busy, all the paperwork they made me do, all the signatures they told me to copy. It all made horrible sense. They didn't just need help. They needed someone to take the fall. And they had chosen me. I stood in that storage unit with the dusty air clinging to my skin, surrounded by boxes that felt like graves. I kept digging because some part of me already knew the truth. I just wasn't ready to face it yet. But the deeper I went, the harder it became to deny what was right in front of me. In one box, I found copies of wire transfers disguised as donations to charities that didn't exist. In another, I found spreadsheets showing money split into dozens of tiny transactions. Classic laundering patterns, the kind you hear about in crime documentaries but never expect to see with your own eyes. And every document connected back to the same name, Rylan Voss. Then I found something that made the floor tilt beneath me. A binder, thick, heavy, organized too neatly for my parents' usual chaos. I opened it, expecting more numbers, more codes. Instead, I found myself staring at something far worse, my name, over and over. At the top of the first page was my full legal name, typed cleanly. Under it, signatures that looked like mine, but weren't. copies of emails I never sent, forms I never filled, invoices I didn't create, and every entry dated within the last 3 months. The family project they forced me to work on, the endless tasks, the constant pressure, the isolation. It wasn't about keeping me busy. It was about making me the face of the entire operation. My handwriting was on the labels. My initials were on the transfers. My email was connected to the accounts. And suddenly, I understood why the deadline mattered, why my father sounded terrified on the phone, why they needed me distracted, why they needed me compliant. Rylan wasn't waiting for them. He was waiting for me. Because when everything collapsed, when the police finally caught on, when the accounts were traced, when the names were questioned, the person standing in the center of the storm wouldn't be my parents. It would be me. My knees went weak. Rage and heartbreak tangled inside me until I couldn't separate them. Every memory of my parents telling me they loved me, every hug, every promise, all of it twisted into something rotten. They hadn't protected me. They hadn't cared for me. They had used me, shaped me, into a perfect shield. And now I knew exactly why they needed me gone. The deadline wasn't just a date on a calendar. It was the day I was meant to take the fall for everything they had done. I didn't go home after the storage unit. I couldn't. But I also knew disappearing for too long would make them suspicious, so I forced myself to walk through the front door like nothing had happened. I ate dinner with them. I nodded at their questions. I pretended my mind wasn't screaming. The whole time, my heart raced so loudly I thought they might hear it. I kept waiting for them to mention the storage unit, to accuse me, to demand my phone again. But they didn't. They were too focused on something else, something that made both of them tense and jumpy. Later that night, while pretending to sleep, I heard murmurs drifting up from the living room. My parents rarely whispered. They usually argued in sharp, clipped tones, but tonight they whispered like criminals planning a drop-off. "She needs to be delivered tomorrow," my father said. "Rylan expects cooperation." Every muscle in my body froze. My mother sounded exhausted. "Do you think she knows?" "Not enough to matter," he replied. "Just get her ready." My throat closed. My parents weren't scared of losing me. They were scared of losing Rylan's protection. And I was the price they were willing to pay. My hands shook as I crawled out of bed. This wasn't paranoia anymore. This was survival. I moved quietly, stuffing the documents I'd taken from the storage unit into my backpack along with my charger, some cash I'd hidden, and a jacket. The zipper sounded too loud in the dark, and I paused, listening. Nothing. I crept toward the window. Outside, the night air looked cold, almost silver under the streetlights. My room was on the second floor, but the porch roof was close enough to reach. I pushed the window open inch by inch, terrified it would creak, terrified I'd hear footsteps rushing toward my door. When I finally stepped onto the roof, the shock of cold air hit my face so hard my eyes watered. I lowered myself to the ground, landing on my hands and knees. For a moment, I couldn't move. Then I heard a floorboard creak inside the house, and adrenaline snapped through me like lightning. I ran. I didn't look back. Not even once. Every step felt like peeling off chains I hadn't realized I'd been wrapped in. The farther I got, the lighter I felt, but the fear didn't disappear. It just changed shape. Because as terrifying as Rylan was, there was something worse. My own parents were willing to hand me over to him. No hesitation, no guilt. And that was the moment I finally understood the truth. Rylan might kill me, but my parents would let him. I didn't have a plan. I just kept moving, letting fear push my legs faster than my thoughts. By the time the adrenaline faded, I was standing in front of a small townhouse on the edge of the city, a place I'd only been once before. Mira Hale lived here. She was an investigative blogger who wrote about the kind of corruption most people pretended didn't exist. I remembered her because my parents hated her. They said she stirred trouble. Now she was the only person I could think of who might even consider hearing me out. My hands shook so badly I almost dropped my backpack as I knocked. It was past midnight, and for a long moment I thought she wouldn't answer. Then the porch light flicked on, and Mira opened the door, squinting at me through the crack. "Ava?" she asked, confused. "It's late. What's going on?" The words tangled in my throat, but when she saw the fear on my face, she opened the door wider. I stepped inside, and the warmth of her living room nearly broke me. I told her everything: the storage unit, the documents, the phone call, the way my parents watched me. She listened, but I could tell from her expression she didn't fully believe me. "Do you have proof?" she finally asked. I pulled out the folder and dumped the contents onto her coffee table. The bank transfers, the coded notes, the fake signatures, the contract with Rylan Voss's name. As she picked up each page, her face changed slowly, confusion fading, shock blooming, fear settling. She didn't say anything at first. She just walked to her desk, opened her laptop, and pulled up a file filled with old reports, missing person cases dating back years. She tapped the screen beside one of the photos. "This girl went missing after Rylan visited town." She clicked another. "This one was tied to a fake charity your family donated to." My chest tightened as she clicked faster and faster, connecting dots I didn't even know existed. Then she looked at me, her voice low but steady. "Ava, your parents weren't protecting you. They were grooming you to replace them." The room tilted. I had suspected it, but hearing someone else say it out loud felt like being punched in the ribs. My parents hadn't planned to sacrifice me out of fear. They had planned it out of convenience. Mira closed the laptop gently. "If we expose them," she warned, "there's no undoing it, no going back." I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of every choice pressing down on me. But I wasn't running anymore. Not from them. Not from the truth. And I whispered, "I know." Mira moved fast, faster than I thought anyone could at 2 a.m. Within an hour, she had contacted 2 officers she trusted, men who'd been quietly building a case against Ryland's network for years, but never had enough evidence to push it forward. When they saw the documents I brought, the mood in the room changed. The tension sharpened, like everyone suddenly understood how dangerous this really was. They didn't waste time. They created a plan built around one simple truth. My parents only trusted instructions if they came from Rylan or someone connected to him. So the officers composed a message that mimicked his coded language, instructing my parents to bring the girl and the final payment to a remote service road just outside town. A handoff, a delivery, the kind of meeting where no one expected things to end cleanly. Undercover officers would be waiting, hidden, armed, silent. My job was to stay out of sight. If my parents saw me, the whole plan would collapse. So they tucked me into the back of an unmarked vehicle about 100 yards away from the meeting spot. I watched through a narrow gap in the tinted window, my hands clenched so tightly my knuckles ached. It felt unreal at first. Part of me kept expecting someone to shake me awake. But when my parents' car pulled into the clearing, reality hit me like a punch. Their headlights swept across the dirt road, illuminating the officers disguised as Ryland's men. My mother stepped out first, clutching a suitcase. My father followed, jittery and whispering sharply under his breath. I could see them talking, though I couldn't hear the words. My mother kept looking around nervously. My father held a smaller bag, one he kept pressed against his chest. When he opened it just slightly, the officer beside him leaned in, pretending to check the payment. Inside was something I wasn't prepared for: a passport with my name, my picture, and an entirely new identity. My breath caught. They weren't just giving me away, they were erasing me. The wound that opened inside me in that moment felt deep enough to swallow everything I ever believed about my own family. I watched the two people who raised me hand over a suitcase like they were completing a business transaction. No hesitation, no grief, not even guilt, just fear and obedience. The officers let the scene play out for a few seconds longer. Then the trap snapped shut. The moment the officers dropped the act, everything exploded at once. 1 second, my parents were speaking in low, shaky voices to the undercover men, and the next, bright flashlights cut through the darkness, and 6 agents stepped out with badges raised. My father froze like an animal caught in headlights. My mother gasped, stumbling back as if the earth had tilted under her feet. Then instinct took over. My father bolted toward the car, gripping the suitcase like it could shield him. Officers shouted for him to stop, but he kept running until two tackled him to the ground. He hit the dirt hard, yelling that this was a mistake, that they had the wrong people. My mother didn't run. She screamed. My name, over and over, as if somehow I had betrayed her. She clawed at the agent's arms, crying that she was innocent, that she didn't know what any of this was. But the evidence was everywhere, literally spilling out of the bags they brought. Cash, documents with Ryland's codes, forged identity papers with my face on them. Everything needed to prove what they had planned for me. The agents read the charges out loud, each one hitting like a hammer: conspiracy, fraud, laundering, aiding organized crime. My mother collapsed to her knees when she heard intent to traffic. My father stopped struggling only when they zip-tied his wrists. Through the cracked car window, I watched the two people who raised me fall apart in real time. And then my mother saw me. The agents had moved our car closer, and when she lifted her head, her eyes met mine across the clearing. Her face twisted, relief, anger, desperation all crashing together. She pushed herself up, stumbling as she tried to get closer. "Ava, explain!" she screamed. "Tell them! Fix this! Fix it!" She said it like I owed her something, like she wasn't the person who had tried to hand me over like a parcel, like she wasn't the one who signed away my future. For a long moment, I just stared at her, not with hate, not even with fear, just with a strange, heavy calm I'd never felt before. Because for the first time in my life, I understood something simple and undeniable. I didn't owe them anything, so I whispered the only word that truly belonged to me. No. Not angry, not broken, just clear. And as the officers loaded them into separate cars, I felt the weight of their choices finally lift off my shoulders. For the first time ever, I chose myself. The months that followed felt like learning how to breathe again. Slow, uneven, unfamiliar. The trial stretched on with testimonies, evidence, and truths I never imagined hearing spoken out loud. Each revelation tore apart another piece of the childhood I thought I understood. But instead of breaking me, it made something inside me settle. It was like my mind finally stopped trying to protect an illusion I no longer needed. Therapy helped more than I expected. At first, I could barely speak. I'd sit there with my hands folded, staring at the floor, unsure how to explain what it felt like to be betrayed by the people meant to protect you. But over time, the words came, sometimes in a rush, sometimes in fragments. My therapist never pushed. She let me unfold in my own time. Slowly, I began to separate who I was from who they tried to turn me into. Writing became another lifeline. I filled notebooks with memories, questions, anger, hope. Seeing the truth on paper made it feel real, but also manageable, like the chaos wasn't living inside me anymore. Some days I wrote until my eyes burned. Other days I couldn't write at all. But healing isn't a straight path, and I learned to accept that. Moving away from my hometown changed everything. My new apartment was small and nothing special, but every inch of it felt like freedom. No watching eyes, no whispered conversations, no fear of being monitored or manipulated. I got a part-time job, then a better one. I made friends who knew nothing about my past and liked me simply because of who I was in the moment. That alone felt like a miracle. Sometimes, in quiet moments, I still hear echoes of my mother's voice or see flashes of my father's silhouette in memory. The old fear tries to rise, but it doesn't last. I remind myself I'm no longer in their world. They don't own my future. They don't get to shape my choices. I am Ava, not the scapegoat they built, not the shield they tried to sacrifice, but a woman who survived their darkness and stepped into her own life. And now, I'm finally living for myself. When the people who raised you try to use you as their shield, the most powerful revenge is stepping out of their shadow and living a life they can never control again.